So welcome everyone to our Church and Society gathering for January 2022. I'm Reverend Phil Dieke. I currently serve at White Rock United Methodist Church. One of my jobs is overseeing Church and Society there, but I also serve on the board of the North Texas Conference Church and Society. And so we do these monthly gatherings as an opportunity to get together and have a conversation about some of the work that's happening, whether that's in local churches or as a conference or even through the general church and the Global Board of Church and Society. And so this month, we're going to talk a little bit about the journey toward racial justice. And so what I've done is I've asked the chairs to come and join me to be a part of this for the North Texas Conference, as well as Edlen, who is Reverend Edlen Cowley, who's our district superintendent in the Metro District. And Edlen, were you kind of one of the founders of this committee?
Yeah, well, so the way that it all happened, we had from Covenant Day, there was a focus from Bishop McKee wanting us to deal with issues of racial justice and bringing that into a broader kind of conference context and conversation. And so there was a group of us, and from that group, officers were elected, and I was elected the chair, Sylvia the vice chair, and we had other officers. So that's how we got started. And actually, that's one of the things that I like to note about the history of journey toward racial justice. The work actually started in January of 2020, prior to George Floyd's murder. And so for me, it's always significant to kind of point that out, because I love it that we were having this conversation before that happened. So when it happened, we kind of had some pieces in place to respond to that in a different way that would not have been there if we weren't already having this type of conversation.
Yeah, it wasn't just reactionary, huh? Like it was already work that was happening from the get-go. That's great. I did not know that, so that's good to hear. And so again, I mentioned that you're the superintendent for the Metro District here in the United Methodist Church here in North Texas. If you're not a Methodist guru and don't know all the hierarchical structures and all that kind of stuff, then I'm not going to take the time to explain that. You can look that up on the interwebs. But Sylvia, will you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. My name is Reverend Sylvia Wang. I serve as pastor at First United Methodist Church in Archer City, Texas. I have a couple roles serving in terms of racial justice on the conference level. Currently, I chair the conference Journey toward Racial Justice team. Last year, I was vice chair along with Reverend Edlen Cowley, and I enjoyed so much working with him and others last year, as well as this year. I also serve as the chair of the Conference Committee on Religion and Race. And I love it. I love the engagements with racial justice with the two different team and committee.
Can you tell us a little bit about that team? What the role of the Committee on Race? I just missed it. Committee on Race and nope. Say it again. I missed it.
That's okay. No. It's. I think it's one of the conference committees that's listed under the United Methodist Book of Discipline. So we often say Church and Society. We say Committee on Religion and Race.
There we go.
And short, we say CORR, CORR. And the Committee on Religion and Race is a Book of Discipline committee under the United Methodist Church, where under the General Board Commission on Religion and Race at the national level in the United States, the Conference Committee on Religion and Race falls under the Commission on Religion and Race, and it's fabulous. There's a disciplinary mandate that governs the work and the scope of the Committee on Religion and Race, and whereas the conference team on the Journey to Racial Justice is not under the Book of Discipline, but both complement one another as we work together in the work of racial justice. Also want to note that there's quite many other conference offices along with Phil, your group, Church and Society, and other committees and teams. I know the United Methodist Women in the North Texas Conference and other groups that all work toward racial justice, and also justice matters in other areas as well. So I want to do a shout out to everyone. But what we do have focused today as we speak from our perspectives as a journey toward racial justice, we'll speak from that perspective today. But I do want to include everyone, all the groups in the conversation, that racial justice and anti-racism work does not it's not limited to one group or one person. In fact, the collaboration across the various groups and entities and communities both inside the North Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church and within the communities outside the UMC. Here and nationwide, it's and worldwide, really, it's crucial for all of us to build relationships and collaborate and work within our spheres of influence.
I'm really glad you said that this is way bigger than any one committee, right? This is the work that we're working toward as a conference, and even beyond our conference, like you said, within the denomination as a whole, and hopefully far beyond that too, right? But that we can collaborate with people beyond our denomination as well. So I really appreciate you calling attention to that. And we are, again, as Church and Society, trying to make sure that this is a big part of what we're doing in the year 2020. Like, this is one of our big emphasis as well. I know that Reverend Joshua Manning was also trying to try to join us today. He just texted and said he's having some issues, which, such is the life of church work, right? Had some other things come up, so he might be able to join us here shortly. But I know that the two of you can speak well to the history of this as well as what's happening currently. So Edlen, back to you. You said it started really at Covenant Day a year ago, basically. What was the process of getting this going, and what were those initial hopes whenever this all started?
Yeah, so it really started as a vision of our bishop, Bishop Mike McKee. I know that Bishop McKee had been doing a lot of work with Bishop Palmer in, I believe it's Western Illinois, the conference that he's a part of. And so this was kind of the next step of that, to begin to have a conversation about it here in North Texas. It will be proper to note that about 20 years ago, there was a group that was focused on racial justice, and it was called the Anti-Racism Team. That particular work was not sanctioned, if you will, by the conference, and it certainly is a difference in the way that work was done and received, and a way that the work that we're doing now is done and received. And I say that because I think those who served in that capacity, again, it's like 20 years ago. We owe them a debt of gratitude for the work that they did. One of the legacies of their work is that now when we have annual conference, when a person serves on a different board or committee, you see the gender of that person and you see what their ethnicity is. I remember the conversation on the conference floor for that to pass, and it was a very contentious conversation. But the outgrowth of that now is when we see conference committees and we want to be concerned about diversity and things like that, we can look and see, are we trying to be representative of everybody that we have? So first I want to kind of share that about the legacy that we have. Now, again, with this being a vision of our bishop, we're just kind of living into that in a different way. And I was blessed to be kind of a part of the founding of that work. But Reverend Wang and Reverend Manning are continuing to do that work, and they're taking it to a higher level. The only thing I would just say is, I know when we started, there were three kind of pillars that we built on, and forgive me because I have two of them squarely in my mind, but the third one is escaping me at the moment. But the first one is vital conversations. Another one is institutional equity, and the one in the middle, y'all have to help me out.
Intercultural competency.
Intercultural competency. There it is. But so those three kind of foundations are kind of like if you think the strength of a three-legged stool, those are the three legs that all the other work stands on. But of course, Joshua and Sylvia can speak to more how that's happening today. But that was kind of the historical thing that we were built on.
I love that. And Joshua just got to join us now, so we're glad that you could make it. We're just kind of getting a little bit of the history of it, and Edlen was including that for us here. And so would you like to introduce yourself, Joshua? Let us know where you're serving from, where you're joining us from today, and we'll start there.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Manning. I am one of the pastors at Grace Chapel, which is a campus of Grace Avenue United Methodist Church. We're on the 380 corridor north of Frisco. And was that all I was supposed to say?
Yeah. So how did you get involved in the work with this? And then,
yes. I think I received the same invitation that they received from the bishop. So I got an email inviting me to be a part of a team, and it was after Covenant Day of 2020, where Bishop shared his vision for anti-racism in the conference, and so I said yes to that invitation. And I also had the privilege of being a part of the coordinating team that worked on the guidebook for the Journey to Racial Justice, the congregational journey rather, and that was a huge chunk of my Making Disciples project for ordination. So.
Okay, talk to me about the guidebook. What's gone into the guidebook, and I know that this is something that congregations have been taking part in. So I want to hear from both you and Sylvia, kind of like what that process has been over the last year.
Yes. So if I'm correct, we're still in the pilot phase for the congregational journey to racial justice, and the guidebook includes a number of different steps, but it begins primarily with an assessment. So an assessment, if you will, which is more like a self-reflection for the individuals who are participating, for the congregation that is participating, and honestly, not just assessment of who they are currently, but who they've been historically. So what their relationship to the community has been historically, what their relationship to struggles for civil rights and human rights have been like historically, what their relationship to the community is today. So that assessment phase has a lot to do with that. There's also one of the first things that congregations are invited to do is go through their own version of intercultural competency training. And so they get to reflect on things like implicit bias and things of that nature. And that's something that kind of the entire congregation is invited to do. So each church also has a small group, which is similar to our coordinating team, that's kind of handpicked by, pastor and staff who are going to lead that. There's a Journey to Racial Justice chair for each congregation. And so, those small groups help guide the process along, clergy and program staff, if you will. So, but it is ultimately the work of the people. Like if you think of liturgy being the work of the people, this is ultimately the work of the people. And the goal, as I understand it, from what we talked about in our development of the Congregational Journey to Racial Justice, is to understand this as a discipleship imperative. So this is an extension of the church's discipleship journey. It is not something that's done in addition to, right? It's not a supplement, right? It is at the core of our discipleship. And so it is honestly that this process is developed to help congregations deepen their discipleship journey.
I love that. That's a great way to really focus the work at the center of what it means to be church. Sylvia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just how many churches started in this pilot program and what have you seen from the churches who've been going through the journey?
I think there were about 12 churches that started on this process. We made a report to annual conference. Last time there were about 12 churches, and I've seen wonderful growth. From what I hear, I'm not the point of contact directly with the churches who work in the congregational journey toward racial justice. The direct point of contact would be Reverend Andy Lewis, who is director of the Conference Center on Missional Outreach, as well as assistant to the bishop. And Reverend Lewis is very much involved as part of the coordinating team. And so from what I heard from him and from the churches is that it's developed relationships. And I know there's one particular church that comes to mind that has been highlighted in the North Texas Conference newsletter, is a church out in the East District of North Texas Conference, where the racial divide within the community is lessening as a relationship are being built, and Black people and white people are coming together more so. And I don't have the personal knowledge to speak to that, but I do know that the community out there is thriving, which is the communities are coming together in conversation, in listening to each other and building relationships. And the congregational journey is adaptive for each community. It's not like we as a conference team come in and tell people what to do. It is not. It is a process of discernment by the particular local church in their context, whether it's a rural community or suburban or urban community, and it's formed from the laity to lead laity. And we have journey companions through the Journey to a Racial Justice team who are trained to accompany each church that's on this CJTRJ, Congregational Journey Toward Racial Justice. And I also want to just highlight the North Texas Conference website on Journey Toward Racial Justice. for more resources on the congregational journey, you can visit ntcumc.org. And if you go to the About tab, click on that, and then you'll see the Journey Toward Racial Justice tab. Click on that. There is a wealth of rich resources to look at, but more importantly, the congregational journey toward racial justice, the information on how to get involved with that, it's there. And we're happy also to receive your emails. I could share with my email, and Phil, maybe you could help me type this in, but I'll just say it. My email is rev.silvia.wang@gmail.com. I'm happy to receive, yeah, that's right. I'm happy to receive, questions or comments or thoughts. And if I don't know how to help out or assist, I know of how to, send questions onward to other people who have more personal knowledge about the process. And so I'm grateful for the process and grateful for the connections that we have within the conference.
Yeah, so those are dropped in the chat if you're with us live now. If you're listening to this later, then check the description below and you can find both that email address and the link for the website. So I'm curious. I'm curious about the people who are journeying along these congregations and what the process is to get there. I'm also curious if somebody's listening to this and they're either a part of a Methodist church who isn't involved as a pilot program and wants to get that going at their congregation, or if their congregation isn't interested in doing it, is there a way that individuals can get involved and be a part of this work? And I'm not sure who to direct that question to.
That actually would be to myself and Joshua Manning. And so we are seeing our work respectively as chair and vice chair this year. There's been some people who have, due to circumstances or their life situations, they have come off the Journey to a Racial Justice team. We had an addition of a few others. And so we see the second year as a reforming of group. As churches grow each year, the Journey to a Racial Justice team and team members in our work together, we grow each year as well. And so I also want to add that the North Texas Conference last summer, we have now a new officer of DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and who is Reverend Dr. Ron Henderson. And so he has been working closely with the Journey to a Racial Justice team, along with other groups. And so we are currently looking into developing individual resources, individual Journey to a Racial Justice booklet or guidebook, and there's discussions on creating liturgy for use and adapting that for various groups. And so we are very aware that the current congregational Journey to Racial Justice as a starting point is adapted primarily for predominantly Anglo churches. And we are aware of that. In terms of the first year, we were discerning on how best to put our heads together. And looking back, it was all during the pandemic, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic. And so thanks to the Lord, really, that we were able to meet on Zoom and have fruitful discussions. And so this year too, we are looking into developing individual guidebooks, liturgy that will be shared with various audiences. And speaking as an Asian American female clergy, I know it's really important to have adapted curriculum or guidebooks for Black people, for Native American peoples, for Latinx, Hispanic peoples, for Asian Pacific American peoples. And I hope I didn't leave out other groups, but I also know that there are biracial and multiracial peoples. So categories are limited, but we have these categories as our society has given them to us, and we do our best to include everyone. And so that's where we're at. We are developing individual resources for use for individual discipleship and reflection.
Joshua, anything to add to that?
One of the things I was going to share was that we have some people who also, as part of the Congregational Drainage or Racial Justice, they serve in a companion capacity. So they walk closely with, and usually they're members of our advisory team, which is a much larger group of people, but they walk closely with pastors and chairs to kind of give them support where they need it, so extra support. So that I think has been something that congregations have appreciated, it is having somebody who they know is going to walk with them very closely, so they don't always have to depend on Sylvia or I, or always been on Reverend Andy Lewis or Reverend Dr. Henderson or anybody else to help them navigate, but they can do that kind of with someone who is their own person, their own support. So I think that was about the only thing I wanted to add.
And then I'll come back to you and just what's, again, as a district superintendent, you're sitting a little bit of a different seat now, not specifically in a certain congregation. What's some of the biggest challenges of this work that you've seen thus far in this previous year, but also that you think is still ahead of us?
Yeah, I think, so I would say the biggest part is just really having a conversation. I think in a broader cultural context, as we try to have these conversations, for political reasons or whatever, they get labeled in a certain way. And the challenge with that is the labeling isn't to enable us to have a different conversation. It's more like let's put a stop. Let's stop this conversation. And for me, the conversation it's important to have. Now, that conversation can take us in several different ways, but I always think we're better for making the attempt to have a conversation than we are with just saying, hey, this is the way things are, and let's just deal with that. Uniquely for us as a denomination, I think as we see the country diversifying, if you just looked at the last census and you can see how demographics are shifting, I think for me, a lot of times as a church, when we're on the trailing edge and not the leading edge, so if we see community and culture developing in a different way, it's not that we're trying to change to match the culture, but as we want to build the body of Christ, as we want to expand God's family, I think we have cousins that don't look like us, but we have something that connects us all together. So this work to me is, I think Joshua said it earlier. I know Sylvia said it as well. We see this as a discipleship issue. It's not just is it a human rights issue? Is it a civil rights issue? Yes, but it's also a discipleship issue. And I believe that the church has a chance. We have a chance to model what that looks like in our culture, because we need somebody to model it because no one's really doing it well. So I would say that, for any church that's trying to be one of the pilot churches for Journey to Racial Justice, for any of us who try to talk about it in different places, we may not feel like we moved the ball that further down the field as a result of that conversation, but the effort is so important. But then even beyond the effort, it's not just the effort, it's actually getting some things done. And so for me as a district superintendent, for me, that's why, and I know we were talking about this earlier, Phil, how having those individual charge conferences, getting to meet people in their sanctuaries, in their churches, talking to them on the ground, taken that time is significant, because, just not to fall into more of a corporate church environment or a corporate church experience, but to kind of have that dual engagement where we're engaging you at a church level, but we're engaging you individually. We're engaging at the conference level. We're engaging at the local church level. We'll engage with the clergy. We'll engage with the laity, and we'll encourage the clergy and the laity together to engage the mission field. So it just, again, from my seat, it's just it's like seeing possibilities and then just saying, oh my goodness, I don't want us to miss this moment. I don't want us to miss this chance. And the chances are always there, but you just want to, you almost want to will it into it, pray it into it in existence, that the progress that we hope to see can actually happen. So it's at one point that's frustrating, but at the same time, it's exciting because you know that every day is an opportunity to hopefully push the ball just a little bit further down the field.
So I'm looking at these three points that you said earlier, the three legs of the stool: the vital conversations, intercultural competence, and institutional equity. And to the three of you, I don't know which one has a good response for it, but like, what are you seeing the movement in the conversations? Like, are those the things that are having the best movement thus far in our pilot programming? Are you seeing like actual kind of like bigger policy process changes that are taking place within, whether that's the structure of local churches or things? I mean, hiring a DEI, right? Like that's something that's big for our conference. But what are you seeing some of the biggest spaces of movement currently?
If I could speak to that briefly, we have been thinking about vital conversations since we started, and then due to the pandemic, it has not been safe or possible to gather together. We do have we have discussions on possibly having opportunities for guided conversations on race. Hopefully that could happen at annual conference. The details are still being worked out, and so we are not able to share more beyond that right now, but I'm very excited that these are possibilities, and we pray for these opportunities to be made possible. Vital conversations in terms of congregations, I have heard that there's discussions formally under the congregational JTRJ, Journey to a Racial Justice format. Also, out in my context and nearby communities, I find that vital conversations happen informally. It comes through just that, getting to know somebody, and it doesn't matter, we're laity, clergy, we just talk, just listen to people. And, there are just so many national world events that we hear about in the last 2 years, and some are so distressing. And so those are ways of conversation starters on how to speak and listen to people. I think I've learned more in the last 2 years from Reverend Cowley and Edlen and other people on our team, and just having a conversation to get to know someone. And that comes through becoming more vulnerable and letting go of our snap judgments. And I had to hold back, just trying to respond right away because I'm uncomfortable with the silence, or uncomfortable with speaking with somebody who doesn't look like me. And so I would just confess that before the Journey to a Racial Justice work that I started with our team in March of 2020, I didn't have that many friends who are Black, and now I have a lot. It's through this work that, yes, I'm doing it because I was asked to do it, but it's become a way of getting to know people, and it's become a passion. And so vital conversations, this piece is happening more formally. We do hope to have an opportunity to have guided conversations on race during annual conference. Intercultural competency, I was very delighted to have been invited to substitute for one of our trainers. And so I had a chance to visit Grace Avenue United Methodist Church and substitute as the second convener on intercultural competency training. That was 3 hours. It was a wonderful experience where we had not we, but the church, we were guest speakers. The church had over 100 people attend. And that's a mix of people attending online as well as in person. And I found that to be tremendously fruitful and just wonderful for myself as a speaker and facilitator. What I learned a great deal from our conversations that night. And so intercultural competency is happening, and it's happening in a more structured way through the congregational journey process, where churches are invited to engage with the training. And the institutional equity, we talked about this a whole lot last year as well as this year. And I am aware that that Bishop McKee and the cabinet have been working on this piece for a number of years, even before Covenant Day in January 2020. And I know that there are behind the scenes work that I know Ellen probably could speak more to it to the extent that he can, but where they are looking at demographics, looking at cross-cultural appointments, when that means is for, let's say, for example, for me, Asian American appointed to a primarily Anglo church in a rural context. So that's a cross-cultural, cross-racial appointment. And so institutional equity also, I know that part of the work is also looking at student loans and debts. So the equity piece, I myself have not, not personally, I don't have the decision-making authority as much in that area. But I do know in conversations and in meetings with Reverend Henderson and Reverend Lewis, I am aware of the significant work. I mean, the significant areas of work that is being discussed and being done by Bishop McKee and the cabinet. And so we are, what is eye-opening for me is that as I go through my days and not thinking about journey to racial justice, but I will be confronted with a situation and I was like, okay, there should be more equity in that. There should be more equity in that situation. And so it's becoming part of my subconscious. And I'm also more aware of social issues and situations and communities in the church, also outside the church and, in the communities where I'm like, yeah, there's an issue with the institutional equity in that system, in our connected systems. And so that's about what I know, but I do know work is being done. I'm not privy to the exact details, as a lot of that is private information that is done at higher levels.
Sure. Above our pay grades, right? Yeah, I get that. So we have actually on the call right now, Colin Packer, who works at City Square. I'll let him introduce himself here in a second, but he was actually just with me for our Sunday sit down that we do on Sunday mornings when we're worshiping virtually only, which is just kind of a 15-minute pre-worship conversation. And him and Reverend Virgil Law, who is the senior pastor at, oh gosh, I'm putting myself on the spot here. It's Northway Christian. There we go. And together they co-chair the Racial Equity Task Force, Racial Equity and Justice Task Force at Faith for Dallas. And so, Reverend Colin Packer, I welcome you to the floor, if you will, here on our conversation. And I know you had a question for me in the chat privately, so I welcome it. Bring your question to the table here.
Absolutely. I was just curious, as we're trying to do work at City Square with Faith Forward Dallas and racial equity. I'm so interested in knowing what's going on in your conference, but what's been the history in Dallas of cross-denominational work in this field, and what would be the future hope also, and how might that happen for partnership between denominations, faith traditions of all kinds? Be interested to know more about that.
I think that these are great opportunities and possibilities to have. And there's not so much a structured program, but I think as we're led by the Spirit and as minds and hearts come together, what I think what is difficult, I speak for my viewpoint, is I serve full time as senior pastor in a local church, and there's various roles that I am called to serve as well on the district and conference level within the United Methodist Church. And so I think it's a for me, it would be an understanding of what I'm called to do, how I'm called to, I guess, to help with the organization and inviting leaders to receive the calling, so to speak. So it basically it's also an issue of resourcing. And so resourcing and the gifts, who are called to do what. I know that up to now, we have focused the work primarily with discrete, smaller tasks, although the congregational journey is a huge task. And so it's basically what God is calling us to do at this point, and what resources we have in terms of people to manage and coordinate. But certainly I welcome opportunities. At the same time, I'm only one person, and a lot of people on our journey to racial justice coordinating and advisory teams also serve full-time or part-time in other contexts. So I welcome the opportunity. It's the idea of how to pull resources together. It doesn't have to be within the church. It's across denominations, and also with community nonprofits, perhaps with the work of the conference. I think anything is possible. But as someone who has worked in a large system, I was formerly a prosecuting attorney in a large system. I know that to do something effectively is that how to get everyone together, but also to have a process in place so that a great idea doesn't just fade away. Or also, if we have a lot of people together across various groups, but there needs to be vision and mission together and some sort of structure, at least, to carry that out for effectiveness. And so I welcome Colin, if you want to reach out to me, and we could share more conversations, and as the ideas kind of become more ripe, I think as there's seeds that are planted, and as Edlen and I talked about last year, bridges that are being built, knowing that you and I, we can't do it all, but if idea or a possibility is coming to fruition, is that we need to pay attention to that. So Colin, I welcome the work and collaboration between Faith Forward Dallas and the conference. And so it's, yeah, let me know how we can collaborate together, and we'll do our best to figure out ideas. And please don't be offended, anyone, if I say, well, we're not ready for that yet, but just do my best to coordinate with the Journey to Racial Justice or Committee on Religion and Race, just to see how we can all serve together best.
I'm looking at the advisory team and it says Reverend Andrew Pfizer's on there. Is that still accurate?
That is still accurate. Yes, that's
I
still
know
accurate.
I'm pretty sure Andrew Pfizer has been involved with Faith Forward as well. I don't know, Colin, if he's been a part of the work that you guys have been doing as well, but maybe that's a good overlap piece there. But Reverend Cowley, yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I'm sure you can say that.
I was going to say, so I think, Colin, for your question, Journey to Racial Justice is technically, I don't know, it was born in January 2020. So, we're talking less than 2 years at this point right now. And I would say that the allusion to the bridges, which when the vision kind of got rolled out at annual conference, it was all about these bridges that we're building. And I mean, it literally is being built right now. What I would go back and point out to would be, for example, when the Botham Jean situation happened, his tragic murder, it was kind of like one of the first times I had seen several of our African-American brothers and sisters, clergy in Dallas, speaking out about that. And we were able, through some actions and some prayer, to put together a gathering of United Methodist clergy for us to speak to that moment. And it was unique because the vision that God had kind of laid on my heart for that was for us to talk to the conference, which is diverse, and for that diversity to be shown in the action that we had. And so we were able to gather there with clergy in front of the Dallas Police Department. And you saw, and it wasn't a speaking opportunity for one person. We had intentionally, we had white male, white female, Hispanic male, female, African-American male, female, so that you kind of saw this broader kind of diaspora of people kind of speaking to the challenge of that situation. And we really hadn't done anything like that before. But I will still say, as far as specifically with United Methodist, we kind of thinking these three, like I talked about the three-legged stool, right? But there's another three-legged stool, and it's the clergy, the laity, and the mission field. And so we can do a lot of work sometimes real effectively. I mean, we like to think it's effective with clergy and laity, but even if we get clergy and laity operating at an optimal level, we still had a mission field out there. So we can, quote unquote, do our church work and feel like we've done a good job without really engaging the mission field. And so I will just echo what Sylvia said. Partners that can help broaden that work, I think it would be a great to add that, but know that you're talking about a group and a thrust and a desire that is still pretty much still in its infancy, but wanting to grow into a strong a strong foundation for what can happen in the future.
Thanks to both of you. I think there are other groups that are going through beginning phases of this kind of thing. And so I think this is a great time, and I'll follow up with you all by email. Thanks so much.
Well, I know, Sylvia, you said this from the very beginning, that this isn't, just the work of one committee or one person or one church. Like I think of the Project Unity that's happening, and I know that Reverend Butler's also on your committee as well, which is really great. And so I know there's a lot of interlapping and interweaving spaces here. So the reality is, the more people we get this out to, and the more people that are aware of the work that's taking place, hopefully the more interweaving that will even take place after that. So that's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation today, is just so that people know that this work is taking place within the North Texas Conference, and hopefully that people are wanting to get involved and to take that next step. And so for 2022, I also have to confess, I kept saying the last year because I totally forgot that we're not in 2021 anymore. And I just totally lost that entire last year. So this is entering into year 3 now, because what is this pandemic life? So for year 3, then, is there a hope that, what do you say? I think there's 12 churches that are in the pilot. So is there a hope that we have X amount of more churches that enter it? Is there a specific number? I know you talked, Sylvia, about like individuals potentially doing it with an individual guidebook. If somebody's listening to this, what's the good next step for them? Other than, I know reaching out to you is probably a good first step, but what's the hope for the committee?
The hope is that what is possible is to look at the book resources that's listed under the Journey to Racial Justice webpage, under the North Texas Conference webpage. There are book and film and podcast resources that are not associated with the conference, but they're listed as a recommended reading or educational tools. And so taking a look at that, and then some of the starter books, for me, I would say starter books, White Fragility, How to Talk About Race, How to Be Anti-Racist, that's the one. There are some, for me, I say they're foundational books to get started. And so there's ways to do that. When you talk to your church, just to see if they're curious about the congregational journey, and it doesn't take a whole lot, but does take the agreement of however the church is structured, the church leadership and the body to agree to get that started together. Now we will, in any group, I would say generally there's just probably not a way to get 100% consensus, and knowing that this is difficult work, soul searching work that we all engage together. And so don't give up. And so I would invite you to take a look at the resources, to speak to me, to think about ways of collaborating under the growth opportunities that we all have together. And so I hope that helps a little bit. I mean, I have these dreams of all these things I want to happen now. I think we all do, but it starts with step by step. Who do we know? Where do we work? What communities we're a part of? And I think being intentional to think about that. I'm sorry, that's my cat meowing outside the door. So unfortunately I'm speaking, so I can't mute myself.
Work from home life. We all get it. It's great.
Yeah. So it's so I was going to say some questions just to know that we all have power. In seminary, I read a book in urban ministry class called Building a People of Power. And it was talking about a group of older Black ladies who felt powerless, but they were able to unite together and see who they knew, and they worked together to collaborate to advocate against an injustice. I can't tell you exactly what that is. This is many years ago I read this book. But why that comes to mind is we may feel like we are just so-and-so, or we are just so-and-so. We're not, but I think we could reframe our thinking to say, well, God has blessed us with life and connections and relationships. So I am not going to use the word leverage relationship. I know that's a lot of times that's being used. I would say build relationships, get to know people as in the work I've been involved with racial justice and serving in rural community, it's been so wonderful to get to know people who don't look like me, get to know people who grew up in a different kind of community than I have grown up in, and to find the commonalities. And I think for us to hold back judgments of ourselves and of other people, and then in this area it's called implicit bias, but really it crunched down to it's really just we all have fears of reaching out to the other. And I would say we could reframe our thinking to say it's not the other, it's another person who's created and seen precious by God. And we may all be different, but there's a thread that is saying we are all human beings, and we all have breath and life and heart and blood, and our differences are a celebration for each other, where we get to know each other better. So I think it's what we can get going with on our own is to do our individual reflection. Whether we are part of a faith community or not, we could still reflect on our own, think about who we are, think about what we do, think about what drives us to give us passion and vision, and how we want to see possibilities in building relationships. And then I think putting us out there is to cross the line of comfort, to be willing to step out into an environment, into a space, into a gathering where we're not normally used to. And I think being authentic and vulnerable to the extent that we are still able to be ourselves. And so I think knowing ourselves is step one. So there's a lot of personal reflective work of engaging with ourselves and with engaging with the people we are with, in our current circles. That's fruitful. And I think it's just being natural about it, and to, I think, just to say, I'm going to watch out for opportunities and be aware and be excited about who I'm going to meet today. And we're not perfect, so there's going to be days that we don't feel as energized to do this, but just be intentional about, if there's an event with, I'll just throw out Project Unity, which I've attended their virtual dinners. If there's an event out there, try it out. It's not a long-term commitment. And if there's an event with Colin, I'm going to use your organization, Faith for Dallas, do that. If there are other groups that are like celebrating MLK Junior Day, when there's gatherings, and maybe that's something that we haven't done before, maybe get involved with that. So I think it's a way of trying new things, but bottom line, it's not to try to get things done, it's trying to get to know people.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there's been a lot of learning taking place in the last couple of years, which is great. And I feel like that next step then is like, what do we do with what we're learning? How do we take what we're learning and put it into action? And I think so often that does come through vital conversations. And having been able to participate in a lot of the Project Unity dines, they're really helpful, just because, again, you talked about implicit bias. We all bring our own stuff to the table when we have these kind of conversations. And it's just a really enlightening work to be able to sit and share and reflect on those things together. Sometimes with strangers, sometimes with people that we know well. So Kelly, I saw you put a question in there about the MLK Center. Do you want to bring that question to the table?
Sure. First of all, I grew up in the southern part of Dallas, and in the heat of desegregation. So this is a huge passion of mine. And I serve on the city of Dallas's advisory board for MLK Center. The first half of my term has been kind of a learning curve and just observing. And the one thing that I've noticed is most of the churches that do support the MLK Center, which really serves the entirety of Dallas, are the Black churches. It's the fraternities, the Black organizations. And what I'm curious is there no one reaching out from MLK Center? And if so, who do they reach out to? So it may just be that there's no one's even thought to reach out to the Methodist Church, for example. But my mission so far, serving on the board, has been to bridge my passion at Owenwood Farm and Neighbor Space and WRUMC with my passion over at MLK Center.
Mhm.
And I love the comment about getting involved, because when you're sitting there and you're stuffing bags for Thanksgiving and
Mhm.
putting all the meals together, there's conversation going on. I happened to be standing there when the verdict came out about the officer who did taser, taser, taser.
Mhm.
Now, that was a mighty discussion going on as you're putting loaves of bread in a bag. And it was a good conversation, you know. I was thrilled to participate in it. They didn't look at me as like, well, there's the only white boy over there saying about something, you know. It was good. And also, we were able to bridge over the Christmas celebration. And I was able to bring the center director over to Owenwood. She got to meet Josh, the pastor over there. And we even got mentioned in the City of Dallas newsletter and everything. But I think it's those little bitty steps in engaging with neighborhoods. But I sure think there needs to be more of it. And what I want to know is, as I run across stuff, how do I let people know? You know, sometimes it's just showing up and being present. You don't have to just to acknowledge the struggle. And the one thing I've learned too is just about every single part of Dallas now is an 80% minority in each district of Dallas. There's only a couple that aren't.
Yeah.
So there's a huge mission field for this. So that's my comment, and my question is, how do I send it to Phil and then Phil sends it on, or what do I do?
Yeah, I just think two things. One is Warren United Methodist Church, which is just in the same parking lot, but unfortunately, due to the storm and other things, there's not been an in-person worship service at Warren. The physical location, the church is still meeting, but in that physical location across the parking lot from MLK Center, they have not had a worship service there since April or May of 2020.
Wow.
And so right now they're meeting in the Dallas Bethlehem Center, which is probably about 2 miles down the road. When Warren gets back, is going to be a great partner. And I would say if there are broader opportunities, I will share with our conference level communications. We have a new communications director who's coming in at that point, at this point. And there's a way for you to submit if you, as Sylvia was talking about the leveraging the conference website, there's a way for you can go and upload things there. And there's a regular communication that comes out from the conference. I think it might be every other week, but I would definitely encourage you right now. Monica Frazier is the person who I'd encourage you to get connected with for things that you might hope to get promoted or shared in a broader way. But I would say even with that, you know, those are two things that I would say immediately. But knowing that the Martin Luther King Center has been there for so long and is such a vital part of the community, I'd love to say more, but those are the two things I can think of right off the top of my head.
Kelly, we couldn't
Thank
have
you.
it in. Monica worships with us at White Rock. She just joined not too long ago, so
she's
we have it in there.
She's
Oh.
my Facebook buddy. Yay!
Oh, okay.
It's all about
That's
who you know,
right.
right?
Monica is at White Rock. That's right.
Yeah, I love it.
So just she'll sit a couple of pews ahead of you. So just tap her on the shoulder.
Catch her there. There you go.
Thank you.
It's these little conversations, right? This is what we're talking about. This is perfect. Well, yeah, I know our time is coming up here, so I want to just say a huge thank you. I know Joshua had to get off again to go deal with other things, which again, we know this is what the life of ministry happens, and so you got to come and go where you can. But Reverend Cowley, Reverend Wang, I'm so grateful for your time. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and for Colin and Kelly for being here with us live. And if you're listening later, we hope that you'll check out the resources we've linked below, whether that's the conference link, website, or reach out to Sylvia. Let her know how you want to get involved. We would love to have you be a part of this. I love that it's called Journey, right? This is for sure a journey. And so I know the journey doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes, like you were saying, Sylvia, we wish it did happen overnight and we could just snap our fingers and we'd be in a whole new place. But it's for sure a journey, and we continue on the work. So let us not grow weary in our work, but let us be inspired by the work of the Spirit as she continues to move among us. So grateful for all you all do. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll be back next month.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Phil. Good to meet everybody.
Blessings to all.